Professor, I need someone to explain to me how a computer works. I mean, like very generally.
I would be glad to. Let's use the whiteboard. When you first hit the power button on your computer, something happens, but you are not quite sure what. This process is called the boot up, or the boot process. All that means is that the computer is trying to start up.
Okay, kind of like an engine?
Yes, sort of. What happens first is that your computer has something called a ROM chip. A ROM chip is read-only memory. That means this chip is read-only. Nothing is ever saved or written to this chip. A ROM chip is different from something we will talk about later, which is called RAM. But the main ROM chip that starts your computer contains the system BIOS, which stands for Basic Input-Output System. The BIOS is permanently stored on this ROM chip and tells the computer how to start up. The main thing the BIOS has to do is to find and load the operating system. The instruction is contained on the BIOS ROM chip.
Okay. But where does the BIOS find the operating system?
The operating system, in this case Windows 10, is stored on the computer's hard disk drive. The BIOS instructions tells the computer exactly where to find it and where to load it.
That makes sense because I know that a computer can't run if it does not have an operating system installed. But why does the computer have to start it up every time the power is turned on?
Good question. Because your hard drive is only a storage device. Your computer actually operates by the back and forth interplay between what is called RAM and the CPU.
I've heard of the CPU. That's the central processing unit, or the main brain of the computer. But I'm not really sure what RAM is, or what RAM actually does.
RAM is random access memory. Memory is different than storage. You might remember a few seconds ago I mentioned your hard disk drive is storage. Storage is where things are saved, but to use something in storage, it has to be moved into memory, or what we call RAM. RAM is what works along with your CPU. When you launch a program, it loads part of the program into memory or RAM. As you are using the computer, the instructions are being executed by the CPU. But the instructions about exactly what to do is coming from RAM.
It sounds like RAM and the CPU are kind of having a conversation. Maybe I could even say that RAM and the CPU are BFFs.
That is actually a good observation. Your computer moves very fast and RAM and the CPU are going back and forth in just fractions of a second. But yes, it is RAM that is talking to the CPU.
So when you use a program, let's say Word, the computer loads all of Word into RAM.
Well, not exactly. RAM has only so much space. You might have heard that if you don't have enough RAM in your computer, it might operate slowly. How much RAM is in your computer limits just how much of a program can be loaded into RAM at one time.
So if you don't have enough RAM, it won't load all of the Word program. That doesn't sound like a good thing.
Well, having more RAM is definitely better. I'll explain to you why the size of RAM is important. If the computer is performing a task, and the instructions are contained in RAM, sometimes the instructions in RAM are not complete. When that happens, the CPU stops, and has to wait for RAM to go back to the hard drive, get more instructions, and then continue to send them to the CPU. So the CPU might be idle for just a bit while it is waiting for RAM and storage to do their thing. Only RAM talks to the CPU, and only storage talks to RAM.
So if the CPU is waiting, nothing is really happening while RAM is getting more instructions from storage. Is that why sometimes my computer feels slow?
Yes, even a 1 or 2 second delay make the computer feel sluggish.
I think I'm getting this. So having more RAM, that means more instructions can be stored in RAM, which then in turn means there is no delay between the RAM and CPU.
Exactly. Very good.
So therefore it is good to have as much RAM, or memory, as possible. Is that right?
Yes, up to a point. But more RAM is generally better, and one of the best ways to make sure your computer is zippy.
And also the speed of the CPU would be important, too, I would think.
Absolutely right. A faster CPU is also important for performance.
I can see though how even with a fast CPU processor, if you don't have enough RAM, your computer might still feel slow because there are delays when RAM has to go to the hard drive to get more instructions.
You are really beginning to sound like a computer scientist. But one more thing about RAM. Do you know what the term volatile means?
Yes, I read about that. It means that certain parts of the computer need power, or the information is removed.
So is storage volatile?
No, definitely not. Storage is where all of the programs are stored permanently until they are deleted.
Is RAM volatile?
That I don't know.
Yes, RAM is volatile. When you shut down the computer, everything in memory or RAM is gone. The next time you start the computer, it once again loads the operating system and programs you launch.
Okay, so RAM goes away when I power down, but storage remains. Volatile simply means when the power goes away, so does the RAM data. Okay, I got that.
Well, I think you are off to a great start here with computing fundamentals. Keep up the great work and keep asking so many good questions.
I may not be a computer scientist just yet, but I feel now I understand the importance of RAM, CPU, and how the computer works. Thanks for explaining all of this to me.